Scripture, the Bible, and the Constitution of the United States. And in his voice, you heard the love he had for the Senate, and realized that he was the embodiment of that institution, which expresses at its very core what American democracy is about. And at the end of our visit, he gave me this wonderful gift, the Senate histories, that somehow he had found time to write, even as he was majority leader and minority leader, and studied and put himself through law school while serving in Congress and serving in the Senate. And he wrote in those books to my friend Barack Obama, and I took those back to my office, and they are one of my most treasured possessions in my Senate office. And so I just want all of you to know that it's not just West Virginia that loves Robert C. Byrd, the mansion. It's the entire United States Senate and the entire United States of America. We are proud. I have to say, though, not only am I upset about having to follow Senator Byrd, but I'm also upset about being brought down here under false pretenses. Because when I was invited to come speak, everybody was insisting that Senator Byrd was in trouble. This was going to be a close race. And last I checked the polls, he's up 30 points. I feel like I've been snookered. I've been bamboozled. But that's not a bad situation. But there's another reason I came, because I think West Virginia represents some of what's best in the United States, and I think that we would all agree that America is at a crossroads right now. And we find ourselves at a crossroads of history. That's a cliche, but this time it's true. And it's a time where you can go to any coffee shop around the country, any VFW hall, any street corner, and you'll hear the same thing, an anxiety about the future. You'll hear people convey uncertainty about where we're headed as a nation, whether it's the war, or Katrina, or the decline in manufacturing, or their health care, or their children's education. You hear people say that we must have finally arrived at a time where we need to move in a new direction. Now, these are Americans who still believe in the limitless possibilities of America. They just don't think their leaders do anymore. These are people who still believe in dreaming big dreams, but they get a sense that their leaders have forgotten how. You know, I remember when I first ran for the state senate, very first race that I ran. I was then practicing civil rights law and was teaching at the University of Chicago Law School, and the Senate seat where I lived opened up. And because I've been active in the community, I've been a community organizer, I've worked on various development projects and job training programs, voter registration drives around the state, so people ask me if I'd be interested in running. And I did what every wise man does when confronted with such a decision. I prayed on it, and I asked my wife. And after consulting those two higher powers, I did what every first-time candidate does, which is basically talk to anybody who will listen to you. And I went to bake sales, and PTA meetings, and block clubs, barber shops, beauty shops. Two guys standing on a corner, I'd pull up and start handing them literature. And everywhere I went, I'd get the same two questions. First question, where did you get that funny name Barack Obama? Although people wouldn't say it right. And they would call me Alabama. Or they would call me Yo Mama. And I had to And they understood that, but then they'd have a second question that bears on this evening. Because they'd look at my literature and they'd say, you seem like a nice young man. Fancy law degree, teaching at a fine law school. You've been practicing law, active in the community, beautiful family, church-going man. Well, why would you want to go into something dirty and nasty like politics? Why would you want to go into something dirty and nasty like politics? And the question is understandable, because at some level, even those of us who are active in politics, even those of us who are active in democratic politics, we feel sometimes a certain cynicism about the political process. That's been fed to us, this notion that somehow politics has become more of a business than a mission. That power is always trumping principle. A sense that we have a lot of leaders that are long on rhetoric and quick on spin, but don't really believe what they're saying and don't follow through. And as a consequence, people pull back from our public life. They tend to their own private lives, their families, and their blocks, and their churches, and their synagogues, but they don't feel engaged. They don't believe that government can really do them any good. They might still vote every 2 years or 4 years, vote for what they consider to be the lesser of two evils, but they don't have confidence that government's going to make a difference in their lives. At best, they hope that it doesn't no harm. But, you know, when I get in those moods, where I sense that cynicism, I'm reminded about, not Illinois, but actually Kansas, back at the heights of the Great Depression. And I think about this young woman from Augusta, Kansas, and the man she had met down the road in El Dorado, Kansas. And this man and this woman fell in love at a time when there wasn't much else. And they married, and he found odd jobs working on farms and oil rigs, constantly dodging the bank failures and farm foreclosures that were sweeping the nation at the time. And he had big dreams for their future. They got married, and he was infected with that restless spirit that's so characteristic of America, this idea that we can do better than we're doing now, that the future is limitless. And he infected that young woman with that same spirit. But as they looked around at the empty stores and the eviction notices littering the streets of a nation that was ill-clothed and ill-fed and ill-housed, I imagine that this young man and this woman must have felt the same sense of anxiety about the future, that same cynicism about government, that same uncertainty about the direction of the country that they loved. But soon an answer came from a leader who challenged a generation to greatness, who asked Americans not to fear, not to doubt, but to rise to the moment and lift this country back on its feet, who knew that we would not settle for survival of the fittest, but survival of the nation. And this young man, when Pearl Harbor was bombed, volunteered to join Patton's Army. He became part of that arsenal of democracy that marched across Europe and defeated fascism. And that young woman gave birth to a child, and even while she was caring for that child, she worked on a B-2 bomber assembly line, crossing the river, helping the war effort back home. And she saw all these factories began to churn. And after the Allies freed Europe, her husband came home to a country that was newly committed to opportunity and prosperity. And he was given a chance to go to college.